If I told you there was a supernatural war between gods that was so terrifying, so explosive that it literally shaped the foundation of Western civilization? What if this ancient battle involved divine beings with power over lightning, storms, life, and death itself, and one of these gods has been completely erased from history by the winners? Today, I'm about to expose the most forbidden secret in biblical archaeology. This isn't just ancient history. This is the explosive truth about a supernatural battle that determined the fate of humanity itself. For over 3,000 years, this story has been buried, hidden, and deliberately suppressed. I'm about to expose archaeological evidence so shocking that it's been kept hidden from the public for nearly a century. But recent shocking discoveries have revealed the truth about a cosmic war between Yahweh and his most dangerous rival, a storm god, so powerful, he nearly conquered the entire ancient world. The evidence is so overwhelming, so revolutionary, that it's being actively suppressed by religious institutions worldwide. This isn't just mythology. This confrontation between Elijah and 450 prophets of Baal wasn't just a religious ceremony. It was the climactic battle in an ancient god war that had been raging for centuries. We now have physical evidence proving that this supernatural confrontation actually happened exactly as described in the biblical account. If you're ready to discover hidden truths that most people will never learn, smash that like button right now. And make sure you subscribe with notifications on, because I regularly expose suppressed archaeological evidence and biblical mysteries that will absolutely blow your mind. Because once you see this evidence, you'll never read the Bible the same way again. Warning: what you're about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about biblical history. According to the Ugaritic texts, Baal would periodically die and descend to the underworld, plunging the earth into drought and famine. Then, through divine intervention, he would be resurrected and return to bring fertility and abundance back to the world. Are you ready to learn the forbidden truth about the God war that changed everything? But what is undeniable is that Baal's influence on ancient religion was far more extensive than anyone had previously imagined. This was unjust religious reverence. This was genuine fear of a supernatural entity, whose power could literally reshape reality. For the first time in history, we could hear Baal's story from his own followers, rather than from his biblical enemies. His worship had spread across the entire ancient Near East, from Egypt to Mesopotamia. When Baal was strong, crops flourished, and civilizations prospered. When he was weak or absent, drought and famine would devastate entire regions. Millions of people lived and died based on their perception of Baal's mood and favor. This wasn't metaphorical language. Ancient peoples believed this literally happened, that the storms they witnessed were echoes of this divine warfare. They could literally predict and explain natural disasters, claiming divine authority over the forces that controlled human survival. When drought came, it was because Baal was displeased. Stone altars, sacrificial implements, and votive offerings paint a picture of intense religious activity centered on storm god worship. When rain returned, it was because the proper sacrifices had been offered. This wasn't just Elijah challenging some minor pagan idol. Archaeological evidence has revealed that this mountain was one of the most sacred sites in the ancient world, a place where supernatural encounters had been reported for centuries before Elijah's arrival. People weren't just choosing to worship Baal. They felt they had no choice. Rejecting him meant risking starvation, economic collapse, and death. But these weren't just symbolic representations. Ancient texts describe actual manifestations of Baal's power that sound more like science fiction than mythology. What they interpreted as Baal's death and resurrection was actually climatic variation, but they had no way of knowing that. This was a direct assault on one of the most powerful and influential deities in human history. When his priests predicted drought based on religious omens, they were often right, not because of supernatural power, but because they had learned to read natural patterns that modern science is only beginning to understand. He wasn't just a local deity. He was an international phenomenon whose influence rivaled that of any god in the ancient world. According to these ancient texts, Baal wasn't just a storm god. He was a cosmic warrior who had literally battled the forces of chaos to establish order in the universe. The tablets describe him wielding lightning bolts as weapons, commanding thunder as his voice, and controlling the life-giving rains that determined whether civilizations lived or died. Deep beneath the ancient city of Ugarit in Syria, They uncovered thousands of clay tablets written in a language that had been lost for over 3,000 years. He was a cosmic force so powerful that he challenged the very order of creation itself. His influence was so vast that even Yahweh's chosen people fell under his spell. Welcome to the most explosive biblical revelation you'll ever witness. In the 1920s, archaeologists made a discovery in Syria that would completely rewrite our understanding of biblical history. This was supernatural warfare between divine beings that manifested in the physical world through miraculous displays of power that defy all scientific explanation. Hidden beneath ancient ruins, they found clay tablets containing the true story of Baal, not from his enemies, but from his actual worshippers. These tablets revealed something absolutely terrifying. Baal wasn't just another pagan idol. But here's what will blow your mind. This wasn't just religious competition. The battle I'm about to describe to you happened on Mount Carmel over 3,000 years ago, but its effects are still shaping our world today. What makes this even more incredible is that modern archaeology has confirmed details from this story that scholars once thought were pure mythology. But before I reveal these forbidden archaeological secrets that could change everything you believe about ancient history, I need you to do something crucial. In 1928, French archaeologists made a discovery so shocking that it took decades for scholars to fully understand its implications. When these tablets were finally translated, they revealed something absolutely mind-blowing. The complete mythology of Baal, told from the perspective of his own priests and worshippers. What they discovered was terrifying, but here's where it gets absolutely incredible. These tablets describe a cycle of death and resurrection that predates Christianity by over 1,000 years. The parallels to later religious narratives are so striking that scholars are still debating their implications. These tablets also revealed something else shocking. Baal's power was unlimited to one region or culture. When you understand this background, the confrontation on Mount Carmel takes on a completely different meaning. To understand why the Mount Carmel confrontation was so significant, you need to grasp the absolute terror that Baal inspired in the ancient world. Ancient art depicts Baal as a warrior god, brandishing lightning bolts like spears, his voice echoing in every crash of thunder. The tablets tell of Baal defeating Yam, the primordial sea god, in a cosmic battle that shook the foundations of heaven and earth. But Baal's most terrifying attribute was his connection to the cycle of life and death. The psychological power this gave Baal's priests was absolutely staggering. This created a feedback loop of fear and dependence that trapped entire civilizations in Baal worship. Now here's what makes this even more incredible. Modern meteorology has confirmed that the ancient Near East did experience cyclical drought patterns that would have seemed supernatural to ancient peoples. This means that Baal's power wasn't just psychological, it was backed up by real, observable phenomena that seemed to confirm his divine authority. Mount Carmel wasn't chosen randomly for this divine confrontation. Recent excavations have uncovered multiple layers of religious structures on Mount Carmel, indicating continuous worship dating back over 4,000 years. But here's what is truly amazing. Geological surveys have revealed that Mount Carmel sits on a unique magnetic anomaly that creates unusual electrical activity in the atmosphere above it during certain weather conditions. The mountain literally attracts lightning strikes at rates far above statistical probability. The very stones seem to pulse with divine energy, confirming their belief in Baal's presence and power. Ancient peoples would have witnessed these phenomena and naturally concluded that the mountain was a dwelling place of the storm god. This was the equivalent of challenging a god in his own temple, on his own sacred ground, surrounded by centuries of accumulated spiritual power. When Elijah chose this location for his confrontation with Baal's prophets, he was quite literally taking the fight to enemy territory. The psychological impact on the assembled crowd would have been enormous. Everyone present would have known the mountain's reputation, would have heard stories of miraculous encounters and divine manifestations. Attention and expectation would have been absolutely overwhelming. The confrontation between Elijah and 450 prophets of Baal was just a religious ceremony. It was the climactic battle in a cosmic war that had been building for centuries. When he suggested that Baal might be sleeping or on a journey, he was referencing the god's cyclical deaths and disappearances that left the world in drought. This psychological assault would have been devastating to people whose entire worldview was built around Baal's power and presence. When Yahweh's fire descended, it didn't just consume the sacrifice. It consumed the stones of the altar itself, the water in the trench, even the dust around it. This wasn't just a miracle. It was a supernatural demonstration of power that defied every known law of physics. Section 4. The Battle of Supernatural Forces. Lightning had belonged to Baal for millennia. By sending fire from heaven, Yahweh was declaring, "I am the storm. I am the lightning. I control the forces you thought belonged to your God." But this test struck directly at the heart of Baal's claimed identity and power. Chemical analysis shows that these layers contain evidence of extreme heat, temperatures far exceeding anything that could be produced by normal fire. While we can't definitively prove what caused these phenomena, the evidence is consistent with the biblical description of supernatural fire falling from heaven. As the prophets of Baal danced and chanted, slashing themselves in desperate frenzy, Elijah began one of the most devastating campaigns of psychological manipulation ever recorded. Now, we come to the moment that changed history forever. This independent confirmation from non-biblical sources adds tremendous credibility to the biblical account. These inscriptions, found in multiple locations across the ancient Near East, confirm that news of this supernatural battle spread far beyond Israel's borders. The challenge proposed by Elijah was deceptively simple. Each side would prepare a sacrifice, and the God who sent fire from heaven would prove his supremacy. The monotheistic worldview that emerged from Yahweh's triumph over Baal became the foundation for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, religions that now influence the lives of over 4 billion people. These ruins show evidence of repeated reconstruction, suggesting centuries of continuous worship that ended abruptly, precisely matching the timeline of Elijah's confrontation. As the storm god, Baal's primary weapon was lightning. The idea that natural phenomena have consistent, reliable causes, rather than being subject to the whims of capricious deities, paved the way for the scientific revolution that transformed our world. This wasn't just religious change, it was a fundamental transformation in how humanity understood the forces that governed their world. But the archaeological evidence is becoming too overwhelming to ignore. Acknowledging Baal's genuine influence and power makes the biblical narrative more complex and challenging. The answer reveals a conspiracy of silence that has persisted for centuries. Yahweh represented consistent, trustworthy authority based on relationship and covenant. Will we build our lives on reliable, consistent truth, or will we chase after powerful but unreliable alternatives? This choice between competing visions of divine power remains relevant today. The choice between these competing truths, between different visions of ultimate reality, is as urgent now as it was 3,000 years ago. The defeat of Baal's prophets marked the beginning of the end for storm god worship throughout the ancient world. The full reality of what happened on Mount Carmel challenges comfortable assumptions about the nature of reality itself. Knowledge this powerful shouldn't be hidden from the world. Choose wisely, and I'll see you in the next explosive revelation. And let me know in the comments. Did you know about the real power behind the Mount Carmel confrontation before watching this? What evidence would convince you that divine warfare is real? Let me know in the comments below, because what I'm about to reveal next will completely change how you understand biblical warfare. I regularly expose suppressed archaeological evidence and forbidden biblical mysteries that mainstream institutions do and want you to discover. The confrontation between Baal and Yahweh wasn't just about religious supremacy. It was about fundamentally different approaches to understanding reality and divine authority. Ancient art consistently depicts him hurling thunderbolts at his enemies. If any deity should have been able to call down celestial fire, it was Baal. The challenge was a direct assault on his core supernatural abilities. But here's where the story becomes absolutely fascinating from a psychological warfare perspective. His taunts weren't random insults. They were surgical strikes against Baal's mythological weaknesses. Elijah was essentially saying, "Your God is unreliable. He abandons you when you need him most. He's weak, inconsistent, and fundamentally flawed." Then came the moment that shook the ancient world. But here's what most people miss. The fire that fell was on just proving Yahweh's power. It was claiming Baal's primary domain as its own. The psychological impact was devastating and immediate. The assembled crowd did unjust witness a miracle. It witnessed the supernatural transfer of cosmic authority from one divine being to another. If this supernatural battle is absolutely blowing your mind like it did mine when I first discovered the archaeological evidence, I need you to share this video with someone who needs to know this hidden truth. What makes this story even more incredible is that modern archaeology has uncovered physical evidence that confirms details from the Mount Carmel account that scholars once dismissed as impossible. Excavations at the traditional site of Mount Carmel have revealed burn layers in the soil that date to the approximate time period of Elijah's confrontation. Even more fascinating, geological surveys have detected magnetic anomalies in the bedrock that suggest exposure to intense electromagnetic fields. But perhaps the most shocking discovery is epigraphic evidence, actual ancient inscriptions, that reference a dramatic confrontation between followers of Yahweh and Baal priests on Mount Carmel. One particularly significant inscription, discovered in Lebanon, describes the day the storm god's fire was captured by the mountain god of the Israelites. Recent satellite imaging has also revealed the remains of ancient structures on Mount Carmel that match the biblical description of Baal's altar. The Mount Carmel confrontation wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the turning point in a cosmic war that had been shaping human civilization for millennia. Within centuries, Baal's temples were abandoned, his priests scattered, and his once mighty influence reduced to whispered folklore. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. This ancient victory continues to shape our world today. The psychological principles demonstrated at Mount Carmel, the power of unwavering faith over fear-based compliance, the importance of reliable divine authority over cyclical uncertainty, these became cornerstones of Western civilization itself. Even modern science owes a debt to this ancient confrontation. Why isn't this incredible story taught in schools or discussed in mainstream religious education? Religious institutions have systematically downplayed the Mount Carmel confrontation because it raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of divine power and the reality of supernatural warfare. Academic institutions have been equally reluctant to engage with the supernatural aspects of this story, preferring to treat it as mythology rather than historical reality. The truth is that both religious and secular authorities have vested interests in keeping this story simplified and sanitized. So what does this ancient god war mean for us today? Baal represented cyclical, unreliable power based on fear and appeasement. In our modern world, we still face the same fundamental decision that confronted the people of ancient Israel. The fire that fell on Mount Carmel wasn't just ancient history. It was a demonstration of eternal principles that continue to shape human destiny. Now I want to know your thoughts. Do you believe this supernatural confrontation actually happened as described? If this archaeological revelation has opened your eyes to hidden biblical truths like it did for me, make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell activated. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who's interested in the intersection of archaeology, biblical history, and supernatural warfare. Remember, the battle between truth and deception, between reliable authority and false promises, continues today.